Good. So welcome everyone to our online course workshop, the Manifesto for the Just City. It's organized by TU Delft, but it's in collaboration with several universities around the world, the UN Habitat World Urban Campaign to commemorate Urban October, and Pakhuis de Zwijger, a cultural platform in Amsterdam that hosts activities connected to the topics of cities for all. I'm here with my colleagues Juliana Gonçalves, Roberto Rocco, Hugo Lopez, and Andres Maglione. We are thrilled to have you here today and happy that many of you also decided to participate in the call to write a manifesto for the Just City. As Roberto already emphasized, the event is broadcast live on YouTube, and it is also being recorded for the podcast Duty of Care, our podcast on issues of the Just City produced by Roberto Rocco and Hugo Lopez. There are several episodes already available, and the link will be made available in the chat. So my name is Caroline Newton, and today, if we wish to speak about the Just City, we cannot ignore the conflicts that knock at our doors. The wars in Ukraine, Nagorno-Karabakh, Mali, and now Palestine and Israel. In the strongest possible terms, we condemn the attacks on innocent civilians, and we desperately need a moral awakening that allows us to move forward in a just way. Additionally, as we gather here to discuss spatial justice and urban planning, we must also acknowledge the recent catastrophic earthquake in Afghanistan. This devastating event has claimed at least 1,000 lives and injured 1,500 more. These calamities underscore the urgency of resilient and just urban planning and the necessity for international collaboration in disaster response and recovery. Conflict and natural disasters serve as a harsh reminder that the quest for a just city is not merely a theoretical endeavor, but a pressing, real-world imperative. Juliana, the floor is yours.
Thank you. My name is Juliana Gonçalves, and it is my pleasure today to speak on behalf of our team of the TU Delft Center for the Just City, a platform to discuss social sustainability and spatial justice. Today, we have an exceptional guest. Titus Kaloki is the program coordinator at the Friedrich Ebert Foundation in the Kenya office, where he leads the Just City program, which engages the concept of a social and inclusive just city to facilitate innovative discussions among political decision makers, civil society representatives, and others on issues such as affordable housing, fair and clean public transportation, and meaningful civic engagement in urban spaces. Titus is pursuing a master's in public administration at the University of Nairobi, where he researches factors affecting inclusive access to urban service delivery in Kenya. The Friedrich Ebert Foundation is a German political party foundation associated with, but independent from, the Social Democratic Party of Germany. Established in 1925 as the political legacy of Friedrich Ebert, the German's first democratically elected president, it is the largest and the oldest German party-associated foundation. It is headquartered in Bonn and Berlin and has offices and projects in over 100 countries. It is the Germany's oldest organization to promote democracy, political education, and it hosts students of outstanding intellectual ability and personalities. Without further ado, I would like to give the floor to our speaker, Titus Kaloki. Titus, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Juliana. Thank you for the TU Delft Center for Just City for having me again, Dr. Roberto and team. I also want to thank all of you who have joined in for this discussion. I personally was excited to read the third volume of the Manifesto for the Just City. I did a feature on page 110 where I give an overview of the Just City in Kenya, which is the basis of what I want to go into a bit more detail today and share a bit on how do we conceptualize the Just City, how do we turn the theory into practice, and centrally, how we achieve spatial justice through inclusive urban planning. So allow me to share a presentation and give me a thumbs up if you can see it. Thank you very much. As I was introduced, I'm a program coordinator at the FES, in short form, you could call the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung. And I've been working on the Just City program for the last 4 to 5 years. This is because of what I'm going to lay about next. Juliana talked about what we do. That's our global footprint. But in Kenya, we have a very particular focus on how do you achieve public goods through public participation. And this will make sense as I continue to share. But let me give you a brief background to the Just City in Kenya. How did we start conceptualizing this? How did we become aware of this? And as you can see there, we had a big influence from the works of Dr. Susan Feinstein from Harvard, who wrote about the Just City based on her experiences in Amsterdam, London, and New York, where she wondered, how comes these rich cities have people who are homeless, for example? We also looked at the works of Henry Lefebvre, The Right to the City. We look at the Sustainable Development Goal 11, because it's very particular about cities. We also looked in our own context at our own constitution, which has actually an article 43 that guarantees public goods and services. By this, I mean education, health, water, public transport, affordable housing. But also we looked at the continent to align ourselves, and we saw that the Agenda 2063 also had this just vision of our urban areas. We have, of course, consulted many other sources, but to bring you to what I call experiential influence to our conceptualization is from the lived experience. This is a photo of Nairobi, the capital city in Kenya. And as you can see there, half the photo on top is well-planned residential neighborhood, and the bottom is not so well-planned and what we call informal settlements here in Kenya. And this for us symbolizes that something is not right in this urban area. There is a form of injustice because both should be able to be well-planned and well-resourced. We looked at what are we really investing in right now. And one of the biggest things that Nairobi is proud of is an expressway. This elevated expressway that caters for those who can pay a toll, those who can drive a car, which in Nairobi is less than 13%. If you look under that highway that is elevated, you can see that it's not well designed. There are no, paved cycling lanes. The motorbike is actually competing for space with cars. You can imagine a pedestrian trying to cross here. So for us, this was another idea of an injustice that, well, yes, we have an expressway that makes economic sense by cutting traffic, reducing time lost. But at the same time, we don't have investments for those who don't own cars, who rely on motorbikes, who walk. And therefore, this made us think we may need to find out through research whether this unjustness that we see in our urban areas is true. And if it's true, what are the few things that may be driving it? And we realized, first of all, that urbanization is unstoppable. I think this has been reiterated a lot. In Africa, it's even very more rapid than many other areas in the world. We also realized quarter of these people who are moving or considering to move to urban areas in 5 years And they were moving because they want to access economic opportunities, be closer to family members, and even access better public goods and services. And therefore, we realized that, okay, let's see, is it true that they can access these better services or economic opportunities? And we found that they were 8 times more likely to access this than their rural compatriots. So these factors of rapid urbanization require people wanting better economic opportunities and accessing public goods and services is a real driver for our urbanization in East Africa and Kenya in particular. What this means is that people come to urban areas with all these dreams and aspirations, but then they are disappointed because they may end up in an informal settlement, lacking water, sanitation. They may not have public transport that works. They may not have access to quality education. So we said we want to discuss the idea of the just city and move from conceptualizing it to unpacking it into a methodology. And for us, we did borrow a methodology from a colleague. It's called transformative change making. And this is important because I want to share a bit, how do we get people, actors to coalesce, to come together around this issue of addressing or achieving a just city. And basically what this transformative change-making process entails is, it says that you really need to first think of an alternative vision, because the just city must be different from what is existing if we agree that a lot of urbanization is unjust. And therefore, at that very high level of visioning, you need to ask questions about what identity is this just city? Who is a citizen there? Who actually belongs there? For whom is this city being built? This is a very key question at that level. And after that, then you come to the meso level, the middle level, and say, okay, what kind of city would it look like? Because now you have the idea of the identity and the citizenship, belonging. And therefore you start to say, okay, for people to feel belonging or as citizens, then this city would have public goods. There would be public participation. It would be inclusive. Yes, and for this, it started to make sense to us, which meant that we have to be able to tell this story of what kind of city it looks like, because people have to be able to visualize it. And for this, you need a strong narrative. You need a strong story that sells hope, that shows, even in drawings or even in audiovisual, what kind of city it would look like. But finally, you need to convince people that it's doable. How do we achieve this? And that's where it's on a micro level. You have to think what policies you would require, what kind of projects you would need to design, what platforms would you use to engage, to generate knowledge, or even to shape the processes. So it's very important for you to know that it starts with the alternative vision, upon which we build a change narrative, and finally demonstrate it's doable with a small project, what we call a catalytic project. This is because we change the way we envision our political struggles. Because at the end of the day, the city is made up of its citizens, its leadership, and all of these do want public services, goods, a share of resources. But we also have those who want to make a profit, who want to achieve efficiency, who want to have security. And we realize that, yes, for us to achieve a just city, we are in the middle of a struggle between the status quo, those who are benefiting from the things the way they are, and the change, people who are progressives, who are already convinced that a just city is possible. And therefore, we realize that if we want to win this struggle, we have to build a transformative alliance. And I'll unpack that shortly. So how do you move from a few people who are convinced that a just city is possible? And this we refer to them as a seed community or a working group, like those of us who have contributed to the manifesto. How do you move from that group to be able to influence other actors that this just city is possible? And this is the support coalition. This is mainly made up of your near collaborators. It could be people in media, in civil society, who champion human rights and who want just cities. And then how do you move from that support coalition of your usual friends to a truly transformative alliance where you have a few other allies who are not your traditional friends, some progressive people from the private sector, some progressive politicians maybe, who can then help you to twist and win this struggle with the status quo by supporting this story of yours, this narrative that you have that sells the vision of the just city. There is a method to it you could apply. So for us, what we said was we asked ourselves, what makes a narrative very strong? And we realized that a narrative is strong if majority of society thinks of what it's proposing as either common sense, fact, or the main belief. And this public discourse is what has the power to shift what society is supporting now or is opposing. And therefore, for us, we asked ourselves, what is the dominant narrative in urbanization in Kenya and Africa in general? And we realized it was the smart cities, because we even have a smart city being built in Kenya, the Konza Technopolis. We have seen many other African countries go on with these ideas of smart cities. And we felt it's the dominant narrative, but it's also business-centered. It emphasizes efficiency, security, centralized control instead of privacy, self-determination, decentralized control in public participation. And we saw it as our opposite, because the just city is more people-centered. And therefore, we wanted to find out who lies very close to business-centered and smart city, because those are people who would need to win over on the long term, but they are currently not our friends. And when we did that, we realized that, okay, it's the big banks, the financiers and government who are pro-smart cities and who are business-centered. And on the opposite, people-centered just cities, we have, the gender justice movement, the protesters for human rights, the NGOs. Somewhere towards the center, we found the built environment professionals, the urban planners, the architects, the engineers, and also the academia. And we realized that these were the immediate group of people we needed to engage, because they can help to tilt the balance. And that's how we formed what we call a Just City working group. And this is the working group. It's diverse. You have academia, media, built environment professionals, grassroots women movements, professional NGOs, all represented here because they have a stake in the urbanization in Kenya. So up to there, I want to first recap and just say, yes, even though we borrowed the Just City concept, through a consultative process, through looking at other people's work on the topic, we were able to conceptualize it within our context. Context is key. Then once we knew our context, we were able to start looking at who are the influential actors and how do we get them on board. And that's how we ended up with a working group. So you may want to ask yourself, what's the role then of this working group? We have, yes, the general idea of a just city. Their work was to break it down. So one is to build this alternative vision. That's the long-term view on the bigger picture. Two is to start influencing through evidence and dialogue relevant policy processes that would be needed to achieve a just city or this alternative vision. But also this is used to inform the discourse, to shape the dominant narrative, to convince a majority of Kenyans that a just city is better than a smart city, or you can have a smart and just city, but not just a smart city. And after that, they have to design a convincing project at the local level that would actually convince and shift the paradigm that it's doable. To be able to do this in a simple way, in a very effective way of communication, then they needed guiding principles. Why? Because they would be able to stand on these principles to tell whether a project, a plan, an approach is just or not. And that's how they came up with these just city principles for Kenya. I will not go into too much detail into them, but I will share the highlight as dignity, because they feel that every person must or has the inherent right of dignity. And therefore, whatever is being planned, projects being built, they must fit into dignifying the residents. Equity and diversity, because urban residents, actors are diverse. They all have their own needs. They cannot be given one suit fits all solutions. You need to understand the person with disability. How do you build a house for them? How do you plan public transport for them differently from that who is able-bodied? And then rights and responsibilities, because as much as we say we have a right to a just city, as citizens, we have responsibilities. For example, public participation, of giving our voice to policy processes or ideas to decision-making processes. And finally, democracy, because a just city means that people are able to shape the urbanization process. It's not just top-down, it's also bottom-up. Up to there, I want to please now bring you to practice, because that was just the introduction of how we got people around the idea of the just city. And now I just want to share with you the actual implementation so that you can translate the theory into practice. This is a photo of Nakuru city. This lies in Kenya, in the Rift Valley. It has a lake bordering it that unfortunately is swelling as some link it to climate change, but it's posing a danger to the city. It's the newest city in Kenya, and that's why we chose it, because there's an opportunity to shape how it grows. And we applied that method, the TCM, the transformative change making. So we were able, through the working group, to start a process of developing the Nakuru Vision 2050, how they would like to look like, and then start putting in the required research, the policy recommendations, by engaging with the Nakuru City Board, the urban stakeholders, hosting just city dialogues to win them over. And finally, we did this catalytic project, which is based on spatial justice, but through inclusive urban planning. This project was a partnership between the Nakuru County, the FES, and the Technical University Dresden. It's called Urban Collective Design, and the short form is UCODE, which is a tool and a process, as I will explain shortly. The reason we chose this is because we have some parameters that tell us whether a project is catalytic or not. We don't just do any project. And therefore, it has to be transformative, that it has to introduce new ideas, new ways of doing things that would be a game changer if they were to be scaled up. And therefore, it has to be scalable. But also, it needs at least a critical mass of early supporters. So for us, we had the Just City Working Group, the Nakuru City Board. They were already sold into trying this. But also, it must be able to exemplify the narrative that you sold to the people, that it is actually an example of that narrative, that it can become a success story, because you will need this to be able to replicate it elsewhere. Also, it might meet all that. Those are technical, maybe parameters, but is it doable? Because you're dealing with governments, you're dealing with private sector, you're dealing with other actors. So it must be technically doable, that you have what is required. It must be commercially viable, because at the end of the day, even if it's a service provided by government, it requires real demand. And it has to be self-sustaining, either through people paying for services or through taxation. Is it politically saleable? This is important, because a lot of the times government institutions may be considering this a lot, because after the end of the day, the regime in power has a manifesto or a political promise to sell. And therefore, this is how we did the project. We started by going to this informal settlement in Nakuru called Kenya Meat Commission. We did a baseline study. We wanted to know what are their key concerns in terms of public goods and services. We also took photographs, both aerial, street view. We collected as much data as possible. And that was the first stage, because then we analyzed this data to be able to integrate with this 3D online planning platform, basically a rendition of their settlement as it is. This was important because it would be able to tell us, for example, which icons to use for which kind of services. This is information they would give us. For example, we would know what kind of issues rank very highly, and therefore what kind of planning possibilities could it have. We could also use the process to have, what are the planning guidelines in Nakuru City? How do we make sure that this 3D rendition of the settlement adheres to planning guidelines? And that is when we were able to have this 3D environment that you see on stage 2. And we did then what we call a co-design campaign, basically going to the informal settlement, setting up laptops, MiFi gadgets, getting a few young people trained so that they can take the other people through this process. And finally, when they were finished with dragging and dropping and saying, I want a street light here, I want a playground here, I want my water to be here in this kind of playground, they were able to answer some of their design wishes. But we also provided them with a written input where they could, for example, rank some of the things that we collected during the baseline survey for us to validate and see whether they think those things are very important. For example, if they had talked about a place where they want a garbage burning site, they would tell us what's important for them. Is it safety? Is it access, pollution? And as you can see there, this is their inauguration day. These are the young people who had been trained. And this is how it looked like over a period of 2 weeks, when few people would walk in, come and say, I want my toilet here, I want my kitchen here. And what came out was both a short-term plan that shows all the wishes, especially those that a majority of residents had selected, that is compliant with planning guidelines. The short-term plan captures what they would want in the immediate, and the short-term captures what they have for their long-term vision. And therefore, they were able to hand these plans to the city board, and the city board has set aside funding to actualize some of their wishes. And in the next year, 2024, we are going to scale this inclusive urban planning project to cover a greater area of the Nakuru city in preparation for the Kenya Urban Support Program by the World Bank. And therefore, as I conclude, I would like to just share a few important lessons for us. One is those working groups that allow you to bring these various actors are important for you to be able to build alliances that will actually convince society the Just City is the way to go. It's also important to have doable small projects that can be scaled up, the catalytic projects, because some people can only be convinced by seeing. For us, we think that by pushing the idea that the Just City guarantees better public goods provision that is inclusive, that is more accessible, yes, we'll convince more people to support the citizen-centered rather than the business-centered urbanization. So have very key thematic campaigns, choose something around the Just City. If you're passionate about housing, you can go for that. Build an alliance around it, showcase a project on it, convince those who are fence-sitters to form an alliance. And therefore, we continue to work with our partners on this and hope to make more policy impact, but also real public investments that actualize the Just City. Thank you for listening to me, and I hope to answer some questions.
Thank you so much, Titus. We've been hypnotized by your speaking skills. It's been a really clear and engaging presentation. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. I have already, before we go to give the floor to the audience, I would like to ask you a question about the citizen engagement in the co-designing sessions. Could you share a little bit about the barriers or how was your experience with that?
Yeah, thank you very much. Just to give an idea, this informal settlement has about 150 households. So we are talking about 400 people or adults. To be able to get a majority of them, first of all, to engage was our first task. And therefore, we did house-to-house mapping and registration. And we invited all of them for an inaugural workshop. However, only 85% attended. The main barriers that we had were, one, many of them work in informal jobs. By this, I mean almost like gig jobs. They are precarious. So if they don't show up for work that day, they simply don't earn. So having them to come for this activity and forgo the income was already a barrier. We tried to compensate for this by offering a modest transport allowance, but still for some, they have to show up for their jobs. And the other one was there is donor fatigue. Many of them have seen other people come do studies, leave, but their condition has not changed. So we had to convince them that the product at the end would be worth it, and we guarantee that it would be taken up by the city board. And this was important to motivate them. And finally, there was the technology barrier, which to our surprise was only with a few of the residents. Initially, we had thought that it would be difficult for them to engage with an advanced 3D platform. However, when we chose a few of the young people and trained them, they were able to catch up very quick because they use a lot of internet, social media, and therefore they knew how to teach their fellow residents in a language, in an approach that they can understand. And this is how we were able to overcome this barrier. And at the end, we were glad with the participation and the engagement.
Thank you. Those are indeed very valuable lessons for us as well, and everybody who's doing citizen engagement. Thank you, Titus. I'll give the floor to the audience now. I see that there is already a hand raised. You can either raise your hand and ask your questions to Titus directly, or you can put them in the chat. I will read them out afterwards. So, Podia, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing it. Please ask your question.
Thank you, Titus, for your great presentation. I had two questions, which I'm super curious about. One is, I'm really curious about the kind of, or maybe you can elaborate on it, the organizational structure that you're using for keeping consistency in your projects, because as I understand, transformative change making is made of so many small steps through a really long period of time. And I was wondering how you ensure that these different projects and steps, they are connected to each other, so we have kind of this co-creation processes in design on a longer period of time in your group. And the second one, maybe it's a more broader question that I had in mind, and it's connected to the context of Kenya. I am really wondering, when you're talking about stakeholders, as I am informed, like superficially, that now in Kenya economy, Chinese government also plays a really big role, as they are investing a lot in the infrastructure and industry and business sector. And do you come across them in your work, or do you have to any kind of communication or negotiation with them?
Thank you very much. Yeah, to the first question, I really would want to emphasize on two things. The first one is, we did not design the Just City project for our partners or the beneficiaries. We designed with. This is very important because if we had come with a fully cooked idea and given them recommendations, at some point, the ownership of that idea might be challenged, and maybe they may lose interest because they may feel, okay, we are more invested into this than them, so it's anyways not their idea. And therefore, what we did from the onset was to just tell them about the general idea and asked them to conceptualize the just city in the context of Kenya. We were very proactive in identifying who to invite into this process because of that analysis we did to find out who are our real blockers. And here you're right, when you refer, for example, to the Chinese financiers, they are closer to government. They will go ahead with their projects. They do even government-to-government agreements, which don't have public participation. But we have those who work with them. For example, they are engineers, they are planners, who we can convince, who can start to see that it makes sense, that they use their skills for the good of the people. So we took almost a year of allowing them, and them I mean this working group, to conceptualize this, to consult with others until they said, okay, for us, a just city is guided by the 4 principles. However, for the longer term, the idea is we only provide, and this is the second thing, the how, and that is the methodology. But we don't tell them the what, and that is what they're interested in, what they want to try first. So for example, yes, we agreed on a just city, but we told them, okay, we have a methodology that is the transformative change making, but what is their interest? So we had a group that was interested in public transport, and they formed their own working group, the Socially Just Public Transport Working Group. And we had another group that was interested more in affordable housing, because they have genuine interests, either as civil society pushing for right to housing, or as architectural association seeking better regulations and policies. So by having this intrinsic motivation, by them working on their interests, we were able to meet halfway, and this then sustains these kind of interventions, because we just facilitate and guide, but they decide on the what and how to move into engagement and policy advisory. So thank you very much. You had asked the second question. I wanted to just briefly comment about it, that we may not meet them in the room in the early stages. But as we progress with this idea, when we call meetings for Just City dialogues, we make sure to invite them into the room. So the Chinese, the World Banks, and the government, and therefore allow them to listen to us, because we do not discuss present issues. We discuss an alternative vision. And by projecting into the future, you allow people not to defend their current interests, but to be able to recalculate their interests in this new future. And slowly they are able to, find this as a safer space, but only the progressives to be able to engage. So thanks.
Thank you, Titus. There is a question on the chat. Naila, I'll get back to you after the question that is waiting on the chat, if that's okay. The question is from Frank Kabila. It says, cities are built on a philosophy. What can be promoted as a good philosophy to make existing cities just and inclusive? This is in the Kenyan context.
Yeah, I like that, because it speaks to the first step, the macro level, when you start to engage with this question of what is a just city. And to get that philosophy, philosophy must be first grounded in humans. What do you desire for the humans, and what do you desire for where they live? In our context, we used the Utu philosophy also referred to as Ubuntu. It's a philosophy that is shared by communities in Africa, more strongly so in this East and Southern Africa. And it means you are because I am, or I am because you are. And this underlying philosophy then says that my well-being, my prosperity is tied to your well-being and your prosperity. And this as an underlying philosophy allows us then to be able to, for example, prioritize dignity. Because dignity, we view it as, even if somebody is poor and another is rich, they should be able to access public goods and services. They should be able to have a chance for self-determination. They should be able to be allowed to engage in society and even facilitated to engage in society. So that was our main underpinning philosophy. However, as we structured it further, we had to invoke the Constitution of Kenya, because a philosophy can be shared, but it might not be legal. And therefore, you also need a legal underpinning, a legal framework to be able to execute. Luckily, the Kenyan Constitution is very progressive on Ubuntu philosophy. Thank you.
Thank you. I also found it interesting that you included the Constitution as part of your the development of the Just City concept in Kenya. So Naya, do you still have your question to close the Q&A session?
I'm assuming you're referring to me.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
No problem. I'm come from a community with a strong sense of participation, and we are used to, let's say, NGO kind of work, but not within the frame of NGO, like within an organic frame of the people themselves. So we've never had any problem of convincing people to share their ideas of what they want in a city or a community and draft proposals, plans, etc. It's always when we give that to the government or to the local even institutions, and they come and they do this ceremony and they take these proposals, is that we find it hard to follow up with this governmental or whomever is to implement these plans, and to do these plans. They have, like, I think, a table full of proposals that are great and inclusive, and no one does anything after this ceremony and taking the photo. Just from your experience, how have you managed to do like with the government and follow up on implementing this plan? And later, if you have any plans for feedback on what happened, like after this implementation, any plans on feedback from the residents and like redoing and having it a continuous like process. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I like that question because it's a challenge shared by a lot of different societies. And for us, it started by changing the way we think about societal change. So initially, we thought that the government, or what you can call the duty bearers, they have goodwill. They would want to do good things for the people. They just lack the knowledge. They just don't have the right strategies. And therefore, our reaction to that was to do research, come up with policy briefs, strategies to guide them, and have this launch event that is reported in the media. And we feel like we've won. But then we wonder, 6 months down the line, the thing has not become real policy even yet. Maybe they're still working on regulations. Or the project that was supposed to spare people has now not spared them. But what we changed was that the government is not always willing. It's a matter of power. It's a power struggle between the government, who are the status quo, and us, the already convinced. And therefore, our approach changed in this way. Yes, we still did the research, but when we got it and we got the policy brief, we did not first give it to the government. We invited other actors that have also power, like the built environment professionals, like one or two progressive politicians, maybe even some opposition members who need something to shout about. And by discussing these ideas and policies with them, and then this starts to get into the media, and you hear a politician, a professor, a grassroots woman saying the same thing, it starts to move what the public is considering as common sense towards you. And by doing this, at the later stages, when we took it to government, they were so eager to jump on it because already the pressure and the demands are there. And by engaging, we helped to formalize the engagement framework between the government and these actors to sustain for the long term, so they keep this pressure and collaboration. Pressure, collaboration. Thank you.
I'm afraid we will need to move on in a few seconds. So Naila, I hope you got your answer, but I would like to address two things as a concluding remarks from this part of the workshop. We still have the breakout rooms. The first partly addresses the question by Nassim in the chat, and it's a plea for everybody to think of the frameworks presented by Titus as the things that we can adapt to our context, and the things that we can reflect upon and that we can discuss with others who are participating in city development. So what I wish to avoid is that you have a solutionist approach to urban problems, which means what? I have a problem, and therefore this is the solution. And that's the smart city attitude, right? There's a problem, and here's the solution. Urban problems are very, very difficult to solve. Some people call them wicked problems. They are not easily solvable. So they are much more complex than finding a simple solution. So I invite everybody to think about Titus' words as this invitation to think about new frameworks. And a lot of the ideas exposed here today are transferable to other contexts, right? But they need to be adapted, of course. And the other thing I would like to really invite you guys to reflect upon is that the method that Titus presented us, and I'm very happy to say that I was already familiar with it because Titus is a friend of TU Delft and has collaborated with us before, so we know what he thinks. If I may, Titus, please correct me if I'm wrong. But his message is really, really important in the days that we are living right now. What he's telling us is that we need to embrace politics. Our enemies, or those who don't agree with us, or those who don't want a just city, are not going to disappear. We need to negotiate with them. We need to find ways to collaborate with people with whom we don't agree all the time. And that's called politics. Politics is not possible everywhere. Some countries have very authoritarian regimes, and politics is difficult. But at least in many countries, we think that it's possible to have dialogues, right? Of course, in the world of today that is so polarized, it's very, very difficult to have these dialogues. But we need to try, and we need to make the world a little bit less polarized. I think one of the things that Titus said that is very important is that we have to shift the dominant narrative. shift the dominant narrative of the city that is there to make money, to produce profit, and so on. So this shift of this dominant narrative is what we want to do here. This is our objective. And but I think we have some time now for a discussion. I think Caroline, do you want to, or Caroline or Juliana? I don't know who is going to explain.
The next step, you mean?
Yes, the next step. Sorry. Yes. If you want also to conclude, Caroline, please, or Juliana, or Hugo.
Shall I go ahead? Okay.
Yes, please.
So, thank you again, Titus. Thank you very much for this really wonderful presentation and some really nice ideas. I wouldn't say tools, but kind of a way to really look into very challenging, complex questions and how it can be approached and how you can break it down. So that was really great. So I would say a final round of applause from the audience. Thank you, Titus.